Thanks again for joining us as we bring you another exciting Catholic life from Austria. I'm here today with Abbot Gregory Henckel Donnersmarck. He was born in 1943 and he's been a priest for 33 years. He was the Abbot of Heiligenkreuz Abbey, or Holy Cross Abbey, for 12 years. And he joins us here in studio here in Vienna. Abbot, it's so wonderful to meet you.
Hello, Ms. Piroch. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you as well.
And hello to all the participants with our speech
All of
here.
our viewers. Thank you so much. I'd like to begin by asking you about your late calling, which you yourself have called a late calling. And at the age of 39, you entered the Abbey of Heiligenkreuz. No? What age were you?
33.
At age 33 you entered the Abbey.
39 was the date when I received ordination.
Okay.
The sacrament of priesthood.
Oh, you became and that was 33 years ago, which is a wonderful number if you're a Catholic.
Well, 33, the age of our Lord Jesus
exactly.
Christ. Exactly.
When he passed away. Tell me a little bit, why the Cistercians? Why did you seek out the Cistercian Order? Tell me about their charism.
I have to explain my vocation from
First.
the first step. I was at that time, with 33, I was businessman. Mm-hmm. I liked to work as a businessman with Master of Business Administration of the University of Vienna in Frankfurt and then in Barcelona. But I had the impression that my life was under the level of religious life, which mm-hmm. was my imagine of myself. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I have to say that my family was a very good Catholic family. I was educated by my parents on a good way to find joy in faith and in the liturgy and in
Excellent.
All these things. And therefore I said, I'm living under my level. I have to find a way to make a better way for that. And therefore the first step was a religious order. The second step was the priesthood. And because an order, Cistercians are Benedictine monks. The mm-hmm. rule is also the rule of Saint Benedict, ora et labora, mm-hmm. under
Pray
the
and work,
authority
yes.
of,
mm-hmm.
of the abbot. And there you can be ordered. Your life will be very good organized by the clock, by the prayer, by the other brothers. And so that was the right way. The second element of my vocation was that I had the experience that all the people speaking with me in business and private relations about church, faith, Jesus Christ, to struggle over the Pope and all these things. And I always confessed what I think, mm-hmm. and I thought that can be a hint to give me the right way for my vocation as priest.
Religion
priest.
Always ended up being a
exactly.
topic of discourse, yeah.
The third element was very surprising also for me. I had the feeling that was under Pope Paul VI, mm-hmm. that I had the feeling of a deep solidarity with that Pope mm-hmm. and the office of the Pope in general. Mm-hmm. And therefore I'm happy to receive then in the monastery the name of Gregory, because Saint Gregory was an important Pope and pupil of Saint Benedict maybe. And that was the bit of my life, because that was in 1975, 1977. Mm-hmm. And in 2007, the Pope came to me in Heiligenkreuz to visit me. My life is fulfilled. All happened. I gave my life
to the Benedictine order,
way.
And Benedict came to you. Benedict
came to
XVI.
me, and solidarity with the Pope, and the Pope came to me to Heiligenkreuz. It's marvelous, and I can finish everything because yet everything is done.
Wow, what a wonderful feeling that must
yes,
be.
Yes.
And I want to talk a little bit about you knowing, as he was then known, Joseph Ratzinger. You first met him when you were a businessman. You weren't yet in a religious order. You met him at a retreat, I believe.
Exactly. I worked at that time in Frankfurt.
Uh-huh. In Germany, yes.
In Germany, and I was invited to take part in a spiritual retreat for a weekend. And there, the Professor Ratzinger, professor in Regensburg, gave the speeches. And I was very deeply impressed, because I never had the experience of a priest and a theologian who spoke so wide, so about economy and sociology and politics and literature. and all that. And that was for me a new experience, and I was completely happy that was possible to part in that weekend spiritual retreat in Bad Wimpfen am Neckar in Germany. And from that moment on, I knew him, but he didn't know me because I was a participant in the great audience. In '85, I was ordained priest, and then I took part in a special reunion in Carinthia, where Bishop Capillari organized the so-called St. Georgener Gespräche.
So a series of talks.
Exactly. And at that time, in '85, Joseph Ratzinger, at that time Cardinal in Rome, in the
Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith,
he was the speaker. And from that moment on, he knows me, because nobody liked to eat with the Cardinal.
Yeah, they were a little afraid to sit down with him.
Shy. Well, he is the chief of the Inquisition. I cannot eat Würstel with him. I said, why not? And Bishop Capillari said, go to the Cardinal, nobody is there, he is so alone. And from that moment on, he knew me, and that was the possibility in the year 2006, when I met him 2 times, to invite him, and finally he accepted my invitation. And
and that in itself was a whole long story, because you had to invite him many times. Of course, the Pope can't just say yes, it's not that easy.
But finally he said yes, and I'm always grateful to. I visited Pope Emeritus Benedict last September.
Yes.
And I repeated my great sympathy and my great joy, thanks, and all that to him for that decision of him.
Most people, I think, at least in the secular press, aren't aware of how great an intellectual he really is. You talked about the wide knowledge that impressed you even before you had entered religious life. Can you speak to his intellectual capacity? He was a professor. Of course, for many years he was head of the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith. When he was elected, I thought, this is a pope who is perfect for this time, because he knows everything that's going on with the church. But you have said his intellectual capacities were not dry, or I don't know how else to say it in English. But
well, in German you can say, jemand spricht trocken. It's not very interesting. Too scientific and too abstract. And I think that's not the charism of Joseph Ratzinger, the Pope Benedict XVI. The problem is the problem for all the popes. And also Pope Francis is now on a very good way to gain the media. I'm sure I had a discussion some weeks ago in Servus TV in Salzburg, and they said, what happened in these 2 years of Pope Francis? It starts also with the critics, because the problem is the faith.
Yes.
The general atmosphere in the media, you mentioned before, is the atmosphere of relativism, of ideology which didn't accept any faith and no revelation.
And everything is equal, no matter, you believe what you want, yes.
And therefore, I think also some part of the public inside the church didn't accept Pope Benedict, because they had the idea to reform everything. And he, in that aspect, was someone who insisted in the continuity of the church.
Yes.
And I think that's maybe one important point. And to underline that he is not dry and not only an intellectual and scientific one.
He's actually very gentle. He comes across almost like a grandfatherly type to me. I love Pope Benedict.
And he has a good humor. And I was so happy when I heard last week in a speech that he is the Mozart of the theologians.
Wow. In other words, a Mozart in theology.
Exactly. Not only because he liked Mozart and he played Mozart at the piano, and he liked to hear the music of Mozart, but also because his theology is gentle, nice, beautiful, and easy to read. There is no problem to read him, and I think that's a good word to him, the Mozart of the theologians.
It's a gift, because John Paul II I find a little bit difficult to read. Of course, he was a wonderful pope.
Yes.
But we want people to read the writings of the popes.
Maybe the problem is sometimes a problem of translation.
Yes.
In the case of John Paul II, which was a great pope. But I'm so
yes.
deeply influenced by these years, many years. All my vocation then later on was under John Paul
II, yes.
II. But he wrote in Polish. Then this Polish text has to be translated to Latin to make the official text of the Vatican. And then from these second translated, then they have to translate to English, to German, to French, to Italian.
And each time it gets worse, probably.
Exactly. And it lost some of his formal expression. The Polish had not this problem because they can read him in his original. And that was the difference between Polish people and German and Austrian. The Polish used the possibility to have a pope of their language in accepting his teaching. In Germany and Austria, they missed this possibility. They didn't took the opportunity to have a pope who speaks their own language.
Yes. I have to ask you also, coming from a Germanic background, how did you feel when a German pope was elected? Did it mean something from a nationalistic standpoint or not?
No. My generation, and I think a great part of people in Germany and Austria, are not nationalistic today. The year we celebrate now, 70 years, end of the Second World War, I hope so, and I think so by my own, that there is no nationalistic movement in electing a pope.
Because there was this famous headline, Wir sind Papst, and someone had to explain to me that means literally we are the Pope. In other words, the Pope is German. So I thought maybe there was some pride in the fact that Germans had a Pope.
I don't.
Their culture, you know.
I don't read that paper, Bild-Zeitung, which made this thing.
Yeah, it's a tabloid.
But I think it's not so bad because it's they repeat another headline when Germany becomes champion in football, in soccer.
Is that where that came from?
Yes. That was the first time. Wir sind Weltmeister. We are champion. And therefore we are Pope. I think it was not nationalistic.
I see.
It is joy about the election of one of that language. But Bild-Zeitung, I think, was everything in favor of Benedict XVI. Also, I don't read this newspaper. The critic came more from the intellectual side.
Yes, which is ironic because Benedict was so intellectual.
Yes.
Yeah.
But he was very consequent in faith and very consequent in theological concepts, and not to make reform because of reform. And nothing
no, he
more.
was very patient.
Yes.
And I know he had a great heart for the church. For example, when the abuse came up in Ireland, they said he was visibly upset, very upset. And of course, as head of the church, he did his best to make overtures towards the faithful so that they would not lose faith.
Also, his visit in the United Kingdom was a great success.
Yes, it was. Yes,
with
Scotland and England. Yes.
Yes, and the famous John Henry Cardinal Newman. I think he received then the title of not a saint but a blessed. Blessed.
Yeah.
And I think that was a great step in the evolution of Catholics in
England, especially where of course once it was very Catholic, but then Henry VIII came and kind of messed things up a lot. So
that's a long history.
That's a very long history. I want to talk to you again about the difficulties that you experienced when you first entered your order. I read that the most difficult for you was actually the idea of giving up marriage and a family, but also obedience was a little bit difficult at the beginning. How hard was it for you? I mean, before you got used to the idea of having to follow such a strict Benedictine rule throughout the day, or was it very freeing over time because you always knew what your next chore would be, when you would pray? Everything is very ordered, and there's a comfort in that too.
Firstly, I have to say that everything what happened after my entrance in the monastery was a great surprise.
Yes.
All what I planned before was completely different.
Oh.
And that's a good experience to make visible and make my own experience that not I am doing my vocation, but God gave it to me. And he said, now you have to follow that. And I have to repeat, not to marry and not to have a family is a great
sacrifice.
But I think it's a sacrifice worth to gain the other things of spiritual life. And therefore I accepted all this. The obedience never has been a great problem for me, because I had superiors every time who gave me orders which I completely joined with them.
They were wise,
I agree.
Yes.
Sometimes I was happy. Maybe the worst decision was to elect me abbot. Then I have to be obedient to the community, but I accepted it also.
Yes.
And I have to say these 12 years as abbot were a great gift, and I was very happy about that. The proof, I have to confess that publicly here in this interview
in the studio,
with you, is the community. If you marry, the basis is love, and you are enjoyed, the wife of the husband and the husband of the wife. If you join a community by your vocation, the basis is not love, and not that all the other members of the community.
You don't know them when you enter.
Exactly.
Yes.
And therefore sometimes it was necessary to have problems in the life of the community.
Yes.
But it was also very good other time to show that I am not the governor of my vocation. I also had to accept this as a necessary part to learn to be member of the community.
Yeah, they say the hardest part of being a member of a monastery is the other monks. So
you're completely right.
Yes. What also interests...
But today I like all my brothers. There's no difference.
Oh, isn't that wonderful? That's great to hear. I know also that when you give up family, at least as a priest, you've got the benefit of the sacrament of holy orders, which gives you certain graces. And people who are outside the faith don't understand the great benefit, the great graces that God gives you, so that you are better able to live this life in a holy way. How many priests are actually in Heiligenkreuz? I know you said since your tenure as abbot began, since you entered the order and then later became abbot, there were roughly 50 people in the order. The number is now up to 90 monks, and you have 20 parishes, so the number has risen dramatically. How many priests are in the order?
In the order in general,
yes.
or in our monastery?
No, in your monastery.
Well, of these 90, I think less than 60. But the great part of the others are students to become priests. We have some vocations to become only a monk, and we accept this because Saint Benedict, in the monastery of Saint Benedict, I suppose the priest was the exception. Today it's the normal way to be monk in the monastery of Heiligenkreuz and all the other monasteries of that style, that the main part are priests. But less or more there came new vocations without the vocation of the priesthood. We had, for example, one interesting case that is an artist. Actually, he made a sculpture of Pope Benedict XVI to put it in front of the facade of the faculty of our institute,
yes.
And it will become a very good work. Or another monk who said, I will become, and he is now member of our community, and he studied agriculture and forestry for the woods possessions.
Yes,
of
forestry,
our
exactly.
Monastery. It's very important to have one who is by academic level have the capacity to arrange all these things of our material belongings.
And we should also mention that Heiligenkreuz isn't simply a monastery. I mean, the monastery is quite large, I believe, but you also have an Institute of Higher Learning for Theology. And this was founded in 1802.
Yes.
But since then, it's grown in importance. Can you explain that?
To speak about the vocations of our members, I think this institute has a very great importance. Firstly, our members of the community who are in preparation for the priesthood, they have not to leave the monastery. They can study with us and on the same place. And secondly, maybe for some is also attractive and interesting to study then more to become professor, to teach at the
theology.
institutes. And maybe that this challenge to become professor of theology at the institute is also part, and I don't think that's bad, to make also as priest and theologian a good career. I think it's not a bad thing. And therefore I always promoted that. Last week we had the great joy that at the University of Vienna, Father Wolfgang, one member of our community, made his speech as professor at the university.
Oh, wow.
Habilitation, you call it in Latin and German. I don't know exactly the word in English. If a doctor then later on made all the necessary procedure to become teaching professor at the university. Great success for us, because we have all the professors with a doctorate, with thesis and all that. But this is, after some years, another time, a first step to become professors at the university, together with our institute.
The theological school is also very important, because you were explaining to me earlier that a lot of these theological institutes or schools have closed, but Heiligenkreuz has now become very important because of that, and it's also reached a specific status, which I would call pontifical status, but you said it's actually even more than that. One has to be very specific when one explains what kind of pontifical status.
Well, I repeat that our institute was founded in 1802, and it was originally erected only for members of Cistercian monasteries to study there. And in the time after the Second World War, by lack of vocations, a great part of other institutes of the same style for the Augustine canons, for the Benedictines and other religious orders, they closed because lack of vocation, and sometimes also because the young students had the idea that the paradise of study will be in Vienna or in Tübingen or in such of these famous places of theological studies. I don't agree with this decision that that is a paradise. And by that, a lot of other institutes of that time disappeared. And exactly at that time, our institute had a new aspect, because the Bishop of Regensburg came with 15, 20 students, late vocations, and he looked for a place where they can study. And from that on, 1975, the institute grew step by step, and therefore it became more and more important. In the moment, our institute with 250 students, and the main part of that is to become a priest for dioceses, other religious orders, also our order, is the greatest institute by that type in whole the German-speaking era of Europe. We have faculties much more bigger in Vienna and Graz and other cities of Germany above all, but for priesthood in these faculties, the universities have only a very small quantity, 10% of the students. And with our 200 candidates for the priesthood, we are the biggest institute for education of priests in German-speaking area of Europe. It's marvelous.
And this is partly the reason why Pope Benedict, I think, came to visit you, was to highlight the number of vocations that you have and the religious life shown in such a positive light.
He has a great interest in a theology which is in coincidence with the Church. You know, there was sometimes very, very attractive in other faculties to say exactly against the Church, or to say the Church has to change completely. Also the idea of a misunderstanding form of reform. The Second Vatican Council was about
continuity, it wasn't about change.
And there are some theological models who don't like that. And therefore some students came to us before they come to their bishop or to their superior to study with us and then go to the bishop. Because they say, if I go directly to the bishop, he sent me to one faculty or one university where I hear a theology which I don't agree. We don't do that to like a marketing institute to gain more students.
No. But you're teaching orthodoxy.
The idea is that we try to explain exactly what the Church teaches, and to explain it. Also to confront it with critics, that is very necessary. but not to take a position in theology in a way of problems with the Church.
Abbot Gregory, I wish you great success with your many vocations at Heiligenkreuz. We'll be praying for that. It's a very, very special vocation, ora et labora, so pray and work. And it's been a real pleasure talking to you as the former abbot and a Cistercian, and dare I say, a friend of Benedict XVI. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Piroch.
And thank you again for joining us for another episode shot here in Vienna, right next to St. Stephen's Cathedral. We hope that you'll join us again soon. Bye-bye.